This video features all of the hypercharges ranked from worst to best. There are so many hypercharges in the game, so make sure to watch the end of the video to know which ones you need to be buying next. Alright guys, the first hypercharge we're going to be talking about is going to be Miko's one, Sound Check. Miko's super also stuns enemies after landing for 1.5 seconds. You will also get a 20% speed boost, a 25% damage boost, and a 15% shield boost. Now realistically, this is the most useless hypercharge in the entire game because most of the time you're going to end up missing your super in the first place. This only works if you can actually manage to hit the enemies with your super. I mean, yes, it is helpful when it actually works, but most of the time you aren't going to be connecting onto them. Even if you do manage to connect onto the enemies and stun them for that 1.5 seconds, unless the brawler has low HP, you probably won't even deal enough damage to be able to kill them. If you kind of think about it, it's actually bad to use Miko's super because when you guys land, the enemies are going to be camping right where you're going to be landing at. So realistically, the best time you should be using Miko's super is to either close down the distance to get closer to the enemies or to actually use it to run away and escape. Alright guys, the next hypercharge we're going to be talking about is going to be Crow's hypercharge of utility knives. Crow's knives are piercing and are returning like a boomerang. Crow will also get a 20% speed boost, a 30% damage boost, and a 25% shield boost. This hypercharge is pretty much going to be only useful inside of heists or in other specific scenarios where there is a stationary target. If not, the knives that are coming back won't be getting any value, which is the whole point of the hypercharge in the first place. You need to be jumping directly onto the enemies in order to get the most amount of value from your knives. Most of the time when you jump into the enemies' faces, you are probably going to die because Crow doesn't have a lot of health anyway. So with this hypercharge, you're pretty much just committing suicide, jumping into the face of the enemies just so that you can have your utility knives go out and come back. Like, it's definitely not worth it. Alright guys, the next hypercharge we're going to be talking about is going to be Pearl's one, Pyrolytic. Pearl's super leaves a burning area on the ground for a few seconds after use. She will also get a 30% speed boost, a 20% damage boost, and a 20% shield boost. Now this is probably one of the most underwhelming hypercharges in the entire game because it's only going to be good in two specific scenarios. One, if there is an aggro brawler that rushes onto you, then it can be helpful to use your super and deal the extra damage onto them. Or if you need to break walls and cover the ground with the burning flames to block a specific choke point, then it can be helpful that way. However, if people see that you have your hypercharge and are waiting to use it, they are not going to want to rush close to you because they know that you're going to be waiting to use it. And even if you do, Pearl has that delay with her super, and it's going to make it a lot easier for the enemies to escape it in time before it manages to connect onto them. And also, people can just run around the burning area that Pearl leaves on the ground from her hypercharge. So with all of these examples that I just explained, can you guys understand why it's probably one of the most underwhelming hypercharges in the game? Alright guys, the next hypercharge we're going to be talking about is going to be Jesse's one, Scrappy 2.0. Jesse's turret has 50% more health and deals 20% more damage. Jesse will also receive a 30% speed boost, a 20% damage boost, and a 20% shield boost. Now this is just a fantastic hypercharge, especially if you can combine it with her energized star power to keep that Scrappy turret alive. This will make it even more difficult for the enemies to take down the buffed up Scrappy turret. It's important to be placing the Scrappy turret behind walls or cover to just make sure it stays alive as long as possible. Now when you are using your hypercharged turret, make sure you're camping near that Scrappy turret and protect it with your life. Get the most amount of value out of your hypercharge because it takes forever for Jessie to get it. Now just like Jackie, you know, her hypercharge does make her a bit of a better brawler, but it's not like this hypercharge is so broken that it makes Jessie an S tier brawler. Now there's just a lot of different things that prevents Jessie from being a very good brawler despite her hypercharge, like having a slow projectile speed, low DPS, slow unload speed. I mean, those are just to name a few. Alright guys, the next hypercharge we're going to be talking about is going to be Charlie's one's Pestilence.
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 But anyway, when Charlie uses her super, 3 spiderlings hatch, dealing damage to the enemies. She will also receive a 30% speed boost, a 30% damage boost, and a 10% shield boost. Now this can just be helpful in general because getting that extra spiders to spawn out is like having an extra spiders gadget. Granted, it isn't the greatest hypercharge because they nerf the health of each spider so they don't even survive for that long. However, it can still be helpful for the spiders to tank shots for yourself while you're hypercharged to ensure your survival, or the spiders can go and scout the bushes in case there are enemies hidden from you and are going to try to surprise you inside those bushes. Now with a brawler like Charlie getting huge nerfs, one of the biggest ones that happened to her was her main attack delay being increased by 100%. So with that nerf, it's just so much harder for her to spam her yo-yo. But now with the hypercharge, this just helps Charlie move quicker, get closer to the enemies, and deal more damage per yo-yo. Now for those specific reasons, that is just why Charlie's hypercharge is so fantastic. Getting those hypercharge buffs kind of counteracts all the nerfs that she got back in December. Alright guys, the next Hypercharge we're going to be talking about is going to be Shelly's one, Double Barrel. Shelly's super radius is increased by 33%. She will also receive a 25% speed boost, a 25% damage boost, and a 15% shield boost. I mean, this is just a fantastic brawler that helps out Shelly so much because it just increases her super's radius, helping her hit more people, and it actually shoots out more bullets, helping her deal more damage. And plus, you're already going to be getting the damage boost from the Hypercharge. Plus, if you're running the damage, you can do even more damage. So realistically, there is no enemy that can survive a Hypercharge Shelly super from point blank range. Now, if for some reason the enemy does survive your super, or you just can't hit your super from a close distance, just use your Clay Pigeons gadget to finish them off. However, this Hypercharge is still just going to be ranked in the middle part of this list because there are just better Hypercharges in the game currently. This Hypercharge is just so good, but it's just kind of sad to see because especially with the nerf that Shelly got to her moving speed, I mean, Shelly just isn't really as good of a brawler anymore. Alright guys, the next Hypercharge we're going to be talking about is going to be Bull's one, Jaws of Steel. Bull takes 80% less damage while using his super. Bull will also receive a 25% speed boost, a 10% damage boost, and a 30% shield boost. Now, this is just such an underrated star power inside the game because it just makes you basically invincible while using your super. Bull needs his Hypercharge so that you can actually charge at the enemies by taking 80% less damage. This is super critical because you need your super in order to get close to the enemies. Most of the time, if you try to charge towards the enemies without your Hypercharge, you'll be getting lowered so much and getting taken down either mid-super or right as it finishes. Now, combining his Hypercharge with his Stomper gadget and his Tough Guy star power makes him completely unkillable, especially if you can consistently chain your supers while your Hypercharge is still active. And even more so if you're running the Supercharge gear, just being able to just chain supers even quicker, I mean, it's just completely broken with Bull. Now, Bull is still mostly a nichely picked brawler on top of the ladder, but he's turning out to be a very underrated pick inside of Power League, but especially inside of Heist. He's just going to be an absolute monster. Like, using his Hypercharge is going to be unkillable, dashing onto the safe, and when he gets there, he's going to be able to burst down that Heist safe. I mean, the safe stands no chance against him. Alright guys, the next Hypercharge we're going to be talking about is going to be Jackie's one, Seismic Event. Jackie's super slows down nearby enemies for 1.5 seconds. She will also get a 25% speed boost, a 25% damage boost, and a 15% shield boost. Now, this Hypercharge helps out Jackie drastically because it can help you slow down the enemies to get more kills. This will overall just make it a lot harder for the enemies to escape your super, and it will help you chain even more supers while you're a Hypercharge. Now, even though Jackie isn't the most meta brawler at the moment, she's still a really good brawler to play inside a Brawl Ball, specifically on the ladder. Now, even though she has this Hypercharge, it doesn't fix a lot of things that makes her a weak brawler in general, like her short attack range and a slow unload speed, just to name a few. Now, let's be real here, if it wasn't for this Hypercharge, Jackie would still be a really weak brawler and amongst one of the worst brawlers in the entire game. Alright guys, the next Hypercharge we're going to be talking about is going to be Rosa's one, Grasping Roots. With Grasping Roots, Rosa slows down all nearby enemies while her super is active. Rosa will also receive a 20% speed boost, a 20% damage boost, and a 25% shield boost. Now, this was considered one of the best Hypercharges in the entire game when it was first released because it was completely broken. You know, sometimes when playing Rosa, the hardest part when using her normal super is the enemies running out of your attack range and being able to just outrun her pretty easily. But now with her Hypercharge, she can easily catch up to the enemies and get them down. And of course, she gets, you know, that boost with the Hypercharge, giving her a speed buff of 20%, which is very helpful as well. Plus, if you are running the Thorny Glove star power with Rosa as well, this will just stack with her Hypercharge to help you deal even more damage. Now, imagine everything that I just said and combining that with Kit constantly healing you up while you go nuts. That is why the Rosa Kit synergy is so broken right now, and Rosa's Hypercharge really makes the whole situation a lot worse. Now, even if Rosa isn't really the most meta brawler right now, for a brawler that's not really that hard to play, you gotta be getting Grasping Roots. I mean, why not, you know? Alright guys, the next Hypercharge we're gonna be talking about is gonna be Colt's one, Dual Wielding. With Dual Wielding, Colt's super is 120% wider. Colt will also receive a 30% speed boost, a 30% damage boost, and a 10% shield boost. Now, not only does this Hypercharge make it easier for you guys to deal damage, you know, because you're shooting two Colt supers at the same time, but it also makes it a lot easier for you to hit since your super is going to be 120% wider. You don't have to necessarily be perfect with your super because you have more leeway to connect with your super with two of them being shot out. This makes Colt such an underrated brawler in the meta because he can already do so much damage with his damage buffs, and he also got a reload buff as well, and he has the reload gear. he can easily just keep on chaining supers and chaining hypercharges because of how much ammo he can reload and how much damage he can do over a short period of time. I mean, the hypercharge is just the cherry on top to Colt's rise in the meta, like the damage buff, the reload gear, damage gear. I mean, all of that just stacks on top of the hypercharge, so you guys really got to be getting it. I mean, Colt is just such a menace right now. Alright guys, the next hypercharge we're going to be talking about is going to be Spike's one Blooming Season. Now in Blooming Season, Spike's super has a 20% larger area. He will also receive a 30% speed boost, a 30% damage boost, and a 10% shield boost. I mean, this is just what makes Spike such an annoying brawler to face in this meta. Like, increasing your super's radius just makes it that much harder for the enemies to escape it. Plus, with you stacking on the damage buff from the hypercharge, Spike can easily shred anybody that gets stuck inside of his super. It's also not that hard to charge up his initial super, so chaining his hypercharge is not going to be a problem at all as well. Now, if you run the Sticky Spike's mythic gear, I mean, it's just the cherry on top of this entire catastrophe. Slowing down the enemies by an additional 30% while they're standing inside of your super makes it basically impossible for them to escape it in time before you manage to burst him down. Now, this is just a definite must buy. You gotta be getting his hypercharge because this also just helps him deal with a lot of the very toxic meta brawlers currently, like Fang and Leon. Alright guys, the next hypercharge we're gonna be talking about is gonna be Colette's one Teen Spirit. With Teen Spirit, Colette's spirit follows her during her dash, damaging enemies on the way. She also receives a 30% speed boost, a 25% damage boost, and a 15% shield boost. Now, this is just what makes Colette the #1 brawler to play inside a heist, hands down. I don't care what anybody says. She can deal 20,000 damage just from one hypercharge super, and she can easily chain her next super if you can hit enemies along the way. It alone doesn't take long for Colette to charge her super, so it isn't that difficult as well to charge her hypercharge too. And if you think about it, you can deal even more damage as well if you have the damage gear activated. You can deal, instead of 5,000 damage per hit, it will be 5,600 damage per hit, giving you an additional 2,400 damage total. The only reason why her hypercharge is ranked this low is because Colette is pretty much only going to be good in heist. I mean, granted, yes, she's really good in heist and always has been, but she's not super versatile like some other brawlers that have a hypercharge. Now, as long as Colette can consistently chain her super, go nuts on the heist safe, I mean, there's nothing that the enemies can really do because she's just an absolute monster inside a heist. Alright guys, the next hypercharge we're going to be talking about is going to be Maisie's one Aftermath. With Aftermath, Maisie's super also shoots her basic attack projectiles around her to all directions. Maisie will also receive a 30% speed boost, a 25% damage boost, and a 15% shield boost. Now, with the recent nerfs to Maisie's super charge rate, where now it takes 5 hits instead of 4 hits, that has hit her quite a bit inside the meta, where it's going to be that much harder for her to cycle her supers. That also just correlates to making it even harder for Maisie to charge her hypercharge as well. Sometimes it's just not even worth using her hypercharge because there's just a good chance the pressure rockets just completely miss the enemies. If you can manage to hit multiple enemies from the pressure rockets that shoot out, that's always a bonus, and now with her nerf to her super charge rate, every single shot counts. However, it is always good to just get the hypercharge in the first place and use it for the stat buffs that you receive from it. Overall, Maisie is still going to be a very good brawler inside the meta, even without her hypercharge, but with the nerfs to her hypercharge, it really harms Maisie more than people realize. Alright guys, the next hypercharge we're going to be talking about is going to be Edgar's one Outburst. With Outburst, after using his super, he will receive a boost in his super charge rate and reload speed for a few seconds. Edgar will also receive a 20% speed boost, a 25% damage boost, and a 25% shield boost. Now, just like Maisie and Fang, Edgar has received a nerf to his hypercharge as well, and they ended up nerfing his hypercharge charge rate by 62.5%. This just makes it even harder for Edgar to charge his hypercharge from any source. What I mean by this is now with the Let's Fly gadget, it's just not as effective to helping him charge his hypercharge as quickly. And also with Edgar just attacking the enemies like normal, charging his hypercharge would just be less as well. And don't even make me mention how long you have to sit there and do nothing in order to fully charge his hypercharge. I mean, this nerf hit Edgar hard. Like, it dropped Edgar from being a top 3 brawler to not even being in the top 10 to 15 anymore. However, the hypercharge has helped Edgar get some time in the spotlight because without it, he would still be amongst the worst brawlers in the game. I mean, I'm just glad that this hypercharge just helps Edgar compete in the meta a little bit more. Like, when he jumps onto the enemies, he can get more kills, and that's just always better with those kind of like 6-year-old Edgar players. Alright guys, the next hypercharge we're going to be talking about is going to be Dynamite's one Boomer. With Boomer, his super bomb spawns smaller bombs. Dynamite will will also receive a 25% speed boost, a 30% damage boost, and a 15% shield boost. This is just another very underrated hypercharge because this just helps Dynamite charge up his super even quicker while he's still hypercharged. The best part is that you don't even have to hit the enemies square with your super because there's a high chance that your smaller Dynamites will hit the enemies as well. I mean, it's always best case scenario if you can hit the enemies with your super bomb because that helps your super charge rate, but it's also good knowing that you have that cushion of having the smaller bombs that'll help you charge up your super too. But not only that though, like the smaller Dynamites can help you cover a great part of the map. You can get some unexpected kills with the smaller bombs by dealing damage to other enemies, which is always a bonus. Plus, if you're using the demolition star power, this just helps you pretty much destroy whoever you throw your super onto. Unless, you know, they're like obviously like a tank, but not a lot of brawlers will end up surviving your hypercharge super in general. I just really love this hypercharge because it helps Dynamite inside this very aggressive meta, so I really recommend getting it. It helps Dynamite just stand his ground as a thrower. Alright guys, the next hypercharge we're going to be talking about is going to be Lose One Slushy Storm. With Slushy Storm, Lu's super instantly freezes enemies in the area. Lu will also receive a 30% speed boost, a 25% damage boost, and a 15% shield boost. Now this is arguably one of the best hypercharges, if not the best hypercharges in the entire game. Like being able to freeze enemies instantly right as you connect onto them with your super is just completely broken. This just helps you and your teammates just defeat enemies a lot easier while they are frozen. And this will also help Lu chain up his next super so that he can get the most amount of value out of his hypercharge. This just makes him the best brawler to play inside of hot zone because he can cover an entire hot zone with his super, making it very risky for the enemies to try and gather time whatsoever. Plus, if you're using the cryo syrup gadget, this can help you freeze up enemies with your normal super, and then that way it'll help you chain up your hypercharge even more. In general, any ability where you can freeze, stun, or slow down enemies in the game, I mean, it's just completely game breaking, so I really recommend getting his hypercharge. It's still 100% broken. Alright guys, the next hypercharge we're going to be talking about is going to be Leon's one, Limbo. Now with Limbo, Leon stays invisible while attacking the enemies. Leon will also receive a 20% speed boost, a 25% damage boost, and a 25% shield boost. Now can you really argue with me? The best hypercharge in the game is the one that lets you stay invisible while you're attacking, heals you for 1360 a second for 6 seconds, or it could even be 8 seconds if you're running his mythic gear. I mean, the hypercharge is the only reason why Leon is like completely broken in the meta right now. The stat buffs that you receive that stack with the Invisi-Heal star power makes it so that you can still move quickly but also heal up. Now what makes Leon's hypercharge completely broken is like if you attack even though you're invisible from the hypercharge, you will still receive the healing from the Invisi-Heal star power. And of course, like I said earlier, something that can make his hypercharge even better is using the lingering smoke mythic gear. This will just increase your super duration by an additional 2 seconds. I mean, this is just an incredibly broken hypercharge because of everything that's going on while you're hypercharged, like the invisibility, the healing, the damage, the shield, the speed. I mean, all of it. You got it all right there. Alright guys, the next hypercharge we're going to be talking about is going to be Fang's one, Dragon Kick. With Dragon Kick, Fang will be able to charge through walls while dropping popcorn on the way. He will also receive a 25% speed boost, a 20% damage boost, and a 25% shield boost. Now Fang's hypercharge upon release made him the #1 brawler in the entire game, but with the recent nerfs to his hypercharge, I mean, he is just not really that good anymore. The 2 nerfs that he received was the hypercharge charge rate was decreased by 50%, and the hypercharge shield boost was decreased from 25% to 15%. Those are realistically some big changes that prevents Fang from consistently chaining his super and also keeping him alive for so long while he's bouncing off the enemies. Now don't get me wrong, Fang is still a fantastic brawler to play. You know, he still has the ability to team wipe enemies, you know, if played correctly. However, with the recent nerfs to his hypercharges, you know, it has really just helped balance him out quite a bit. However, there's still a lot of nerfs that should be going his way. Well, there you guys go, a ranking of all of the hypercharges from worst to best. I really recommend buying them from best to worst because obviously that's what you should be doing, right? Well, anyway guys, if you guys enjoyed that ranking video, I highly recommend you go check out this ranking video right here.